Welcome to On the Horn with Charlie Armey. I'm your host, Gary Emmons. We're going to be focusing on scouting. Charlie Armey spent a career scouting in the NFL football players. And so we're going to dig into that, and maybe you're going to learn a few things of what that lifestyle looks like and what that means. So, Charlie, welcome to On the Horn.
Well, I'm glad to be here. And look, I viewed our last session. It was pretty good, and I'm very anxious to talk about scouting it.
Well, Charlie,
yeah, in the NFL.
Yeah, I just want to get my mind around. So if you're scouting for a team, you got to go to colleges and high schools or whatever that means all over the country. I mean, that puts a lot of pressure personally on you and your family and your wife growing up, doesn't it?
It sure does, and my wife of 60 years, as I told you, she's a North Dakota native. She's from Drake, North Dakota. Actually, her name was Audrey Drake. And we were married for 60 years, but I couldn't have done any of this without her support and backing 100%. Whenever I talk about what I've done, is not what I've done, is what we've done. And we had a great associate together. And, it's difficult to be a wife in the NFL, either as a scout or as a coach, especially as a scout, because you travel so much. She has to take care of the home front and then support you in all the different ways. So I was very lucky. I had a wonderful wife, and we were married 6 years, have two beautiful daughters. So nothing could be better in my life than remembering her.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I appreciate that. As a guy that's got 3 million miles on my life on airplanes, I don't know how many thousands of hotels I've stayed in all over the world. And so, Charlie, I can't imagine what that means scouting. So give us a little bit of perspective of what your life looked like those years you were scouting, because I believe the first time you started scouting, the first team was the Buffalo Bills in 1978, correct?
That's correct. 1978, I joined the Buffalo Bills as a Western United States scout. And that meant I was responsible for scouting all the teams in the Western United States and filing reports on their players and so on and so forth. And it meant you're on the road a lot. I used to drive my whole area because I didn't like to be subjected to the rules and regulations of flying, because if I felt I needed to stay a little longer, I could stay a little longer. And if I felt I was completed my job at that particular college, I could move on quicker. So it's a lot of traveling. You're away from home a lot, but it's quite involving. Scouting is an art, and a lot of people don't realize it takes a lot. You have to put a lot of effort and energy into scouting and the different types of things that you have to look for when you're looking at a football player. And I can get into a lot of that if you want me to.
Yes, I'd love to, because, just because an athlete is fast or they got a great arm doesn't mean they're going to cut it when they get to the NFL, because, the small amount of people that play professional sports, if you take all of the colleges and all the people from around the world that want to compete and play in a sport, in this case, NFL football, there's a lot that goes into a person. So talk to us a little bit about it when you say it's an art, because just because you got a great arm and fast doesn't mean you're going to be successful.
No, that's correct. And there's a lot of factors, but I always used to tell my scouts, I want you to remember, it's not how fast they run, it's how fast they play. And you have to be able to realize that a lot of things go involved in how fast they play. Instincts, reaction time, recognition, all that goes into how fast they play. Because a kid runs real fast doesn't necessarily mean he plays real fast. I'll give you a little story about a great quarterback in the National Football League, and I'm not much on giving out names and stuff because I don't like to embarrass anybody. But this particular quarterback went on to be one of the greatest quarterbacks that ever played, and he was cut from 3 different football teams because he wasn't a very good athlete. And then he went on to eventually become a Hall of Fame quarterback. So you have to be careful when you start putting people in boxes, how fast they run, how tall they are, and what kind of athlete they are. I'll give you an example. Tom Brady, when he came out in the draft, he went to Indianapolis and didn't do very well. And as a result, everybody forgot what he did on the football field and started thinking about what he looked like as an athlete. and they fell to the sixth round. And when Patriots took him to sixth round, they were just looking for somebody who could come into camp and give him some relief in camp. And it turned out to be one of the greatest quarterbacks ever played the game. So you got to be careful when you put them in a box. And there's all kinds of rules. And guys, I've worked with Bill Parcells. He didn't like linebackers that were under 6'2". Well, along comes London Fletcher. He's 5'8", middle linebacker, played 17 years in the NFL, never missed a game, will someday be in the Hall of Fame as well. So you can't put a label on anything with players. You just have to analyze how they play and what they contribute as a player on the field.
So Charlie, when you kind of go out and meet with an athlete, and you look and watch them play, look at the films and all that kind of stuff that you can talk about. I mean, obviously the family, sometimes good parents, sometimes adversity, because there's split up families, inner cities. Talk to us a little bit about the family life. For Beck has a lot of people that are young athletes that aspire to play higher level sports, which many and most won't ever get there, let alone college, let alone the NFL. But the idea of family and the environment that athlete grows up in. Talk to us about how and what you've observed in that context.
It's interesting. Football, and of course other sports, but football in particular, saves a lot of young people who grew up in a very bad environment. You take Marshall Faulk. He was raised in the worst area you could possibly be in New Orleans, and his mother, it was the worst possible area a young man could grow up in, and his mother kept him on the straight and narrow. And his environment that he lived in was as bad as you could find a young man to be brought up in and exposed to every possible type of crime you could be exposed to. And because his mother was such a sweetheart and devoted to her son, she kept him on the straight and narrow. But he came out of the projects in New Orleans, where it was almost impossible for a young man to succeed, and went on, of course, and now had a great career, and again, a Hall of Fame running back. But you have to be careful where they come from and their background and what they're exposed to. And there's a lot of kids that were saved by the National Football League and other college sports and high school sports just because of the time and effort that's put into them by some coach or somebody who takes their interest at heart. And there's a lot of heartwarming stories like that. But then there's some really bad ones that don't turn out as well either. But that's the way it is in life. And but you have to make sure you research the player's background very carefully, find out where he came from, what he was involved in. And we have one rule when we start a draft process. We have what we call the main board. The main board has about 13 to 1,500 players on it. On that main board, you're going to filter that down to what you call your draft board. But the number one thing we all filtered out of our main board was players with character issues, repeat character issues that were a problem. When we put them on the board, we called it other people's boards. So you have to research the player. You have to look at their background. You have to follow them back into high school. We follow them back as far as we can get the research, and then determine whether they can stay on our main board or they have to go on what we call our other people's board, or the character board.
Charlie, when you do this, and I think of drafting, because you're out scouting to draft these players that are going to be on the team. Now, there's a whole other scenario about not only finding the right athlete, but playing in the competition of not letting the other teams that you're competing for. So let's say you got your focus on a quarterback. The reality is somebody else may have that quarterback. And if the word gets out that you discovered something that someone else did, good or bad, how that plays out in the media and with the other teams for competition, kind of getting them in the route. Talk to us about what that means and that looks like.
It's very sophisticated in the National Football League. Very few players escape the vision of most of the teams in the National Football League because of the sophistication of how it's operated. But there always are a few. And I'll give you an example. London Fletcher was a player. He played at Carroll College, a small college in Ohio. And he sent me a tape, and he sent the same tape to every NFL team of him playing. And I looked at this tape and I couldn't believe this kid was making every play on the field on defense and every play on field and special teams. And I wondered, what's the issue with this football player? So I started to research. Well, he's a middle linebacker and he's 5'8". And so I thought to myself, now nobody's going to take a strong look at this young linebacker. It's 5'8". So I got my scout that scouted that area, and I said, I want you to go in and I want you to work out London Fletcher. If you tell anybody about his football player, you're not going to have a job very long. And I do not want you to tell any of our coaches on our staff about London Fletcher, because coaches like to talk to their buddy coaches and say what they've discovered and what they've seen when they went out scouting. So we rely pretty much on our own staff. But anyway, make a fast story for you. London Fletcher came. I signed him then as a free agent. When I was signing him, he looked across the table. He said, "Why did you sign me?" I said, "That's because I could eat peanuts off your head." I knew nobody would draft a 5'8" middle linebacker. But he looked at me straight in the eye and he says, by the end of the year, I'll be your starting middle linebacker. In the last game of the year, we played San Francisco and he made 17 tackles as a starting middle linebacker. And then he played for 17 years. So you can't put him in a box. And you have to be careful if you discover something like that, that you can keep it undercover and let people know. One of the players that played with him, father was running the Indianapolis Colts, and they were on the same team together. And I was sweating out that the father of the Mike would find out about this kid from his son and decide to put him on their radar as well. But we lucked out, and so you got to be careful when you do find somebody that's got that fits what you're looking for. You got to be careful and do everything you can to keep it undercover.
So, Charlie, we're going to go to the break. When we come back, we're going to dig in a little bit further on some of these stories that you have related to scouting. So we've been talking to Charlie Armey, scout for the NFL. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Stop out to our facility, Highway 22 South. Let us build a truck for you.
Hello and welcome to the MHA Interpretive Center. It's the perfect stop along the Lewis and Clark Trail and the cultural hub of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. Nestled along the shores of Lake Sagagawea in Newtown, North Dakota, 1 mile west of the Four Bears Casino. You can enjoy amphitheater performances, art exhibitions, and educational workshops utilizing our Living Cultural Center. Enjoy some coffee, browse our gift shop, and learn about the original people of this land. Learn more at mhanation.com/interpretive center.
Welcome to Arrowhead Cleaners. Newly renovated, modernized, and ready to make your cleaning needs hassle-free. From commercial and residential wash and fold laundry services to the latest in professional dry cleaning techniques, we are dedicated to your unique needs, offering alterations, fabrications, and even custom hat making. So whether you're a busy professional, a family on the go, or even a rodeo champion, Arrowhead Cleaners is here to take your things from messed up to dressed up. Now celebrating our 64th year in Arrowhead Plaza.
Home on the Range offers a nurturing place for teens who may have just come from an unsafe or traumatic environment. Here, they receive therapy and education services centered around animals, and the surrounding nature provides opportunities for work, fun, and healing. Life skills learned at Home on the Range are carried with residents when they return to the community with new talents and a greater appreciation for themselves and others.
Are you dealing with arthritis, nerve and back pain, dry skin, or superficial wounds, but found no relief? Give Stewart's Natural Health a try. For over 4 decades, Stewart's Natural Health has been helping people and animals with herbal and natural oil lotions, ointments, and creams with a mission to help you relieve pain and feel your best using the power of nature. Discover the safe, drug-free solution to your pain, guaranteed or your money back. Visit stewartsnatural.health today.
West River Equipment of Mandan is here to help you maintain peak productivity in your operation. As an authorized dealer for many high-quality equipment lines, we have the new and used equipment it takes to make your farming, ranching, or construction operation profitable and efficient. West River Equipment also has the parts on hand and the experienced technicians in our shop to get your equipment back in action fast. Find what you need at West River Equipment on Old Red Trail in Mandan.
Welcome back to On the Horn with Charlie Armey. I'm your host, Gary Emmett, and talking about his years as scouting in the NFL. So, Charlie, when you take into the fact that you never know what you're up against, and you have this big board, as you said, of 1,400 people, and you're going to narrow it down and narrow it down, what is the number that kind of becomes the cutoff that you have on a board related to NFL Draft Day?
Well, this is an interesting question. And when we started out, after I get done eliminating the people on the other people's board, mostly because of character and other issues, but then I go to our main board and I start filtering down the board. And now you got to keep in mind every position is unique to itself. In other words, there's certain things you look at. If you're looking at a defensive player, you're looking at instincts and awareness and reaction. If you're looking at an offensive player, it's assignment football, looking at his ability to learn and carry out his assignments. What I usually do is start narrowing that board down to our main draft board. And it's a process as I start narrowing it down. Then I start using a grading system that we developed called the alphabet system. And I designed this system, or we designed this system, because the focal point of every NFL football team is the head coach. Everything evolves around the head coach. He has to have the players he thinks he needs to win. So I kept thinking to myself, or we did, and how are we going to design this to make it easier for our head football coach? And we designed the alpha system. Well, the alpha system meant we identified players alphabetically so it would make it easy for our coach. For example, an A player is a player who had everything, was destined to be a Pro Bowl player and probably a Hall of Fame player. In the 30 years, I had one A player, and that was John Elway. And all the other, then it went down to B player was the guy who had all the same traits, but he lacked in some area, but he still was able to become a quality player and probably a Pro Bowl player. And it went down. And then the D player was a player that would be for sure a Hall of Fame player, or at least a Pro Bowl player, and an instant starter in the NFL. So the alphabet went down. And so when I would talk to our coach, I would say, we have a D player. Immediately he'd know that he has a player on the scope that we feel as scouting department would be able to start for him at an early age and become a great player, or probably a Pro Bowl player. So we identified each player's strength and weakness with the alphabet system. And then we went and added the numerical things. And then there were certain guidelines that we followed. For example, you could not make our main board, which our draft board, unless you had a competitive number of 6 or better, which means that you were better competitive than most players in the National Football League. You cannot make the main board unless you had that competitive strength. And that's just, and then there's other things that we use as outline to scale that down. But to give you an example, we started off with 1,400. By the time we get done filtering these players with all this different types of things, that I can get into what each player, what you look at for each position, but we wind up on draft day in our draft room with 145 players for 7 rounds. And we always have 1 or 2 players left on the draft board when the draft is over.
Interesting. And I just think of when you're talking about that, you got to scout all these players, but it ties back to the team and the coach who says, hey, we need a quarterback, or we need a defensive lineman, or we need a center, offensive lineman. Those are all factors that you have to take into account as well, don't you?
That's exactly right. And how we handle that, because coaches, they see a player, they want that player, especially position coaches. And you can't blame them. They want a player, they know the player they think will improve them. But in our grading system, we had a tier. In other words, if a player was in the D category, say he was a 7 or better, he felt in one class. The next class was a 6 or better, or a 5, and so on down the line. If you're on the draft day and on the draft board, and there's a players that are in the elite group, and the coach wants to reach down out of that group, you have to maintain your discipline and take the player, regardless of what you feel your needs are, that's in that elite group, because he will be a Pro Bowl player someday. Now, the further you go down that list and that stack of players, the easier it is to go to need, because you have more and more players in that group of players. So once you get into a group of players where they're basically all the same grade, then you let the players dictate by position what your needs are, and you take that player. So it's a unique policy if you have discipline. If you have discipline, and having a draft board is a very easy thing. If you don't have discipline, then you start drafting mistakes all over the place. And the problem with it in the NFL draft room, if you make a mistake, you draft it. So you have to be careful, and you have to stay disciplined. You have to stay disciplined within your scouting staff and with your coaching staff. So it's an interesting process, especially on draft day, because everybody in that draft room is an assistant coach who wants their player, the player they think can make them better, and we want to get that player for them, but we don't want to sacrifice quality in order to get that position player that we're looking for.
So, Charlie, in 1985 to 1987, you were a scout for the Green Bay Packers. Who was quarterbacking in those days for the Packers?
You know, Dickie was the beginning of the quarterback in those days. And we had an interesting thing in our draft room. We were looking for a quarterback. And we had an old scout who had been a coach. He coached for years at the Green Bay Packers. Now he became a scout. And we were in the draft room, and every first round comes along, and he's pounding on the table for this quarterback. He wants this quarterback. He wants us to take him in the first round. And everybody's looking at him, and the coach is looking at him, and everybody thinking, you know, this guy's barely 6 foot tall, and he's just got an adequate arm. We're not going to take him in the first round. So the second round, and the same thing. So finally in the third round, the coach says, I don't know why you're so excited about this player, but if he's there when we pick in this round, we'll take him. Well, San Francisco took him, and it was Joe Montana. So you've got to be careful in the draft room and listen to the people who have done this work and worked the science and understand the players. You know, it's not always the guy who's the tallest or the fastest or quickest. The quarterback position is very unique. Number one, mental toughness. If they're not mentally tough, they have to overcome failure all the time. It's like a guy on a golf course. Every time he steps up to the ball, he's got to overcome failure. But the quarterback, something's going to happen bad in a football game, every game to the quarterback. He's got to be able to overcome that, and that's where mental toughness comes. And that position is unique to his individual skills, not his athletic ability. Athletic ability has nothing to do with playing the quarterback position. So there's some unique things you need to study about quarterbacks and understand to make sure you get the right person in the job.
Charlie, when I think about offense and defense, got cornerbacks and wide receivers, a lot of times it's the same type of athlete, but one can catch the ball and one can't, or maybe one knocks it down. Talk to us about the contrast between, you know, a Deion Sanders, you know, and also a wide receiver, some of these people that you would have dealt with when it comes time to those playing off those two positions.
When it comes to wide receivers, we had a unique system. We only graded the competitive catches with a wide receiver. We know everybody can make the routine catches, but we only graded the competitive catches. We drafted a kid by the name of Torrey Holt. And when he played He played at North Carolina State. When they played Florida State led the nation in defense at that particular time. And during that game, he made several catches, but all of them were competitive catches. And that was one of the things that stuck in our mind when we drafted him with the 6th pick of the draft. Number one, he made the competitive catches, but we also had a great receiver on our team at the time by the name of Isaac Bruce. And everybody would double cover Isaac Bruce, and it was hard to get him the football. So we were talking with Coach Vermeil. We knew that if we drafted Torrey Holt, as competitive as it was, as talented as he was, it would also make Isaac Bruce a much better player. And exactly what happened. Without Torrey Holt making Isaac Bruce a better player, we don't go and we don't win the Super Bowl. Torrey made some competitive catches in the Super Bowl that were really beyond belief. So you have to be careful how you evaluate a player. I can give another example of player, and again, I won't mention his name because it's embarrassing to him. He was drafted number one by Pittsburgh because he had caught so many catches in just off the chart with his production in a small college. But when we started grading the thing that was happening, he was making great catches, but he wasn't making any competitive catches. Well, Pittsburgh drafted him in the first round. He never played it down in the National Football League. He just couldn't make the competitive plays. And you have to be careful. Make sure you stay with your discipline. What you're looking at, any player at any position, make sure you stay with your discipline on how to evaluate that player and make it work.
You know, Charlie, I was just thinking about when you're talking about the decision for Holt to draft him. I mean, that's the Rams winning the Super Bowl, and were you general manager during that draft, or were you still a scout?
No, I was the vice president of player personnel, running the scouting department, pro and college scouting department, and became general manager after we won that game. But my love was in personnel. And being a general manager means a lot of other things. I really wanted to pretty much stay within the realm of finding players and developing players, and that was much more rewarding for me. And that's where my skill set lies. And doing contracts, of which I did a lot of contracts. They're a headache, you know. You were dealing with a contract, you can make a mistake, it costs your club a lot of money. So I enjoyed the personnel part of it, and that's where I stayed. But even though I was a general manager with other responsibilities, the personnel department, running the personnel department was where I fit and where I wanted to exist.
So, Charlie, we're going to go to the break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about a team of what a team of scouts looks like. So we've been talking to Charlie Armey on the horn with Gary Emmons and Charlie Armey. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Base Flug Trailers of Dickinson is a family-owned dealer with expert staff that know their products front to back. We stock over 150 units of all types and can custom order a trailer with the unique features and capabilities you require for brands you can trust. Our experienced service team is the reason we're also the best place to have your trailer customized or repaired. Count on Base Flug Trailers of Dickinson to keep you hauling.
Come on in and experience small-town hospitality and the personalized care that makes car buying a pleasure.
We know that every journey starts with the right car. Whether it's school drop-off, weekend road trips, or your daily commute, we have the right vehicle for you and your family.
With trusted brands, affordable prices, and a team that treats you like family, finding your next car has never been so easy.
We pride ourselves on personal attention and quality service. Beset Motors, where our customers send their friends.
Yeah, U.S. Cattlemen is a member organization that each member has a vote in anything we do with policy. We're representing the independent cattleman or the cow-calf guy or an independent feeder or whatever. We like to support the independent producer. Talking about mandatory ID, we're talking about cool, we're talking about all the legislation that's going to be coming down with the new administration. There's going to be lots of moving and shaking, so always check us out at our website, uscattleman.org.
I'm $27,000 in credit card debt.
Okay.
You have to radically do something different, because if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting.
Now's not the time to be doing math. The time to be doing math was when we didn't go into $200,000 of debt.
If you are freaked out and you're stuck in these debt payments and you think it has to be a part of your life, it doesn't.
We are Ladies of Another View. Join us every weekday morning at 9 o'clock a.m. as we discuss the big topics from North Dakota, the nation, and around the world.
We chat with everyone from celebrities and medical professionals to politicians, local business owners, and neighbors about the topics and stories that affect all of us.
We are unscripted and uncensored real news from real people. So join us every weekday morning for Ladies of Another View on Beck.
Welcome back to On the Horn with Charlie Armey. I'm your host, Gary Emmett. So, Charlie, when you have a scouting team, so you scouted. Obviously, in the early days, you're probably driving around. You talked about in your car heading from one school to the next, meeting with families. By the time you get in the NFL and you build a team, what does a scouting team look like for an NFL team?
You're trying to find young people that have that ambition or them in their blood that they want to go out and study talent and help in this area. It's not a very glorifying job being a college scout in the NFL team. You travel around, you look at the players, filing reports, doing background checks. And I've tried to find players. First of all, I wanted a mixture of guys who have been there and done that, and find guys that were reliable, because those were the guys I usually put on our top 100 players in either the Western United States or the Eastern United States. And then I like to develop the young scouts so we could develop them into our way of thinking and our way of handling things. I had one young scout like that by the name of Brad Holmes. He came in and as a rookie scout and trained and worked hard and learned our system, believed in our system, and went on. And he's now the general manager of the Detroit Lions. So developing a young scout is as important as developing a young player. And we look for that mixture, the guys who wanted to do it, had an ambition for doing it and a fever for doing it. And of course, going on and them to be successful. And some guys live their whole life as scouts and are very successful and probably don't get recognized enough for what they've achieved in contributing to their football teams.
Charlie, talk a little bit about some of the coaches you worked with as a scout and the impact it has, and maybe some memorable moments and the impact of, like, you discovered this great athlete and the interaction with the coach related to that.
You know, I'll give you an example. There's a great running back at Pittsburgh, Curtis Martin. And in junior and senior year, he played very little because of an injury. And Bill Parcells is our head football coach, and I really liked this player, and I had him pretty high on our draft board. And we started discussing with Coach Parcells. I think he only played like 3 games his senior year, but he had these injury problems. So getting more people involved in the process of scouting is more than just the scouts. So I got our medical people involved, flew the player in, and had him medically evaluated, and our medical people assured Coach Parcells and myself that the problem that he had medically could be fixed and repaired, and he could go on and play in the National Football League. So Coach Parcells agreed. In the 3rd round, we drafted Curtis Martin, and of course, and in the end, then he goes on and becomes an All-Pro and a Hall of Fame running back. But that's an example of using more people and more resources to discover a football player and find out what his true identity as far as playing in the National Football League can be. But that's an example of how that works. And thank goodness Bill Parcells was smart enough to agree to draft this player, and again went on to develop him into one of the greatest players that ever played the game.
So Charlie, when you take a look at the NFL and these athletes, you take the early days when you were scouting and the lifestyle that the athletes had, the training, the nutrition, I would just like to have you contrast. My guess is early on, if you hear some like the great early pro golfers, they started out, they'd party all night, and they'd come out barely sober sometimes when they hit the golf course in the morning. You have these interesting stories of how it's changed and how the athlete, the mindset, the people around an athlete, especially a high caliber one when they got big dollars at stake. Can you talk about how the NFL has changed from, back when you started doing this to the way it looks today?
Oh, it's changed a great deal. When I first started, for example, in our practice facilities and in our game facilities, we had kegs of beer. Players that come off the practice field, they could have themselves a beer and relax, and we had a smoking area where they could sit down and smoke. That's all evolved. And when we play a game on the road, they'd get on the plane and they'd give them a basket with some sandwiches and a couple beers to drink on the way home. Well, that's all changed now. It's all become more disciplined. You don't have that same type of environment. There's no smoking in the dressing room. There's no alcohol in the dressing room. So everything's become more sophisticated from the standpoint of taking care of the player's health, taking care of his well-being, and keeping him fine-tuned into what he needs to become to be the greatest player he can be. So it's changed dramatically and over the years, and now it's, of course, everything is so fine-tuned and eaten properly, the proper amount of time to spend in the weight room, the type of weights you lift, and the amount of time you spend on the practice field. Everything is much more sophisticated and much more refined than it was back in the days when I first came in the NFL.
So Charlie, when you were scouting and you traveled, you said you covered the U.S. for some of the East Coast teams. Talk to us a little bit about some of the experiences you had in some of the schools and the universities. You're a young athlete out there. What are some of the programs that you saw that continually churned out athletes that you would say, hey, when this school had somebody, there was something good coming out of it because they did their homework, out of high school to get you prepared from college to the NFL, right?
Yeah, schools like Nebraska and at that time Florida State and USC, and there are certain colleges that had a tradition of building a great program, much like North Dakota State has done over the years. And when you went into that school, you knew, number one, when you went in and evaluate a player at one of those schools, especially schools that had the same personality as like North Dakota State, you knew the players, number one, were going to be well-trained, number two, well-disciplined, and mentally tough. And that's the factors that look like. That's why a lot of our coaches was like, I want my players to come from that particular school. If I want them to come from Oklahoma, Nebraska, Alabama, schools that had this development background and had already developed their mental toughness and their discipline. So you look for that type of school. And I went into a lot of schools where there occasionally you would find a player that was self-motivated, that the school wasn't as disciplined as, like, say, North Dakota State, but the player was self-disciplined and self-motivated, and you could find players in those schools as well. But generally, you really look forward to going to the schools where the environment was such that you knew the players were being prepared properly to play in the next level in the National Football League. The rate of those kids that make it is only about 3%. So that's a fine line. And so you're always looking for that edge you can find, and usually find it at those disciplined schools. That's why a lot of the kids at North Dakota State have gone on and played in the National Football League. It's because they come from a disciplined, well-organized, mentally tough football program, and it lasts over the years.
So Charlie, talk a little bit about academics, when you had athletes that really had a good academic or someone that didn't struggle through school. And that happens many times for a variety of reasons in a young athlete's life. Maybe you can give some insight into that.
It's very important when you start looking at the background. Like we gave them all tests, mental tests, find out about their academic, but we really went back and researched their academic background at the colleges. We talked to their college professors, checked their college history, and find out if they had the same dedication in studying what's going to happen with their life after football as they did about studying football. And there's a big correlation between people who are successful in the classroom and studying and their success on the football field. Awareness and instincts are very unique in the game of football, and you don't have awareness if you're not intelligent and you don't work at that in that area. But there's a lot of kids. Kids are funny. You know, I went in. I was talking to this one player, and I said, "Tell me about your GPA." He just had graduated from University of Oklahoma, and I said, "Tell me about your GPA." He looked at me and he said, "Why do you want to know about my GPA? I have a diploma. Mine's the same as everybody else's." So the players are unique in how they look at education, but mostly you do a research and a background to find out what kind of students and their ability to learn, especially if they're offensive players. It's very important that they are able to handle assignment football. Again, one wrong, all wrong.
Well, I think of the sophistication of the plays, when you talk about a quarterback preparing, at least what you hear on the media side of it, how that football intelligence, but having a mind to remember all the things that are happening on any given play with all the things. And it can happen in real time, right? The quarterback walks up and says, okay, everything's different than what we were going to do right now. I mean, that matters, doesn't it?
That matters. And the greatest quarterback today that's able to achieve that awareness on the field, of course, is at Kansas City. He has a unique ability to not only see the entire field offensively and defensively, but memorize it as the play develops. He makes unusual plays because he memorizes everything that's happened at the time of the snap of the football to where they are when he throws it. And he has a unique ability just to know where they are. And it's again, mental awareness, mental toughness, mental awareness is so unique in the instinct. You know, being a quarterback, it's a very sophisticated position. You not only have to have the ability to recognize what's happening, but you have to have the ability to deliver the ball on time and accurately. And the great ones all have that. That's what set Kurt Warner out apart from a lot of the people. You know, Kurt Warner was in Green Bay Packers training camp, and they never even took a look at him. And we put him in NFL Europe. He broke all the records in NFL Europe. But he had this unique ability. He not only knew what was happening on the football field, he had the great awareness, but he had the ability to get the ball off on time and accurate. Getting the ball off on time and being accurate are critical for playing the position of quarterback.
Charlie, we're going to go to the break. and we come back, I want to dig into some of your biggest surprises and some of them that you would say, boy, we had this one for sure. It didn't quite work out. You may not want to name names, but I'd like to dig into that a little bit. So we've been talking to Charlie Armey on the horn with Gary. I'm going to stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey y'all, it's Trent on the loose. I want to tell you, Lady Blue and I, we got a lot of miles together, but you know what? You and I got a lot of miles together as well. And all I want to do is bring to you the information on how we maintain a domestic supply of food and fuel for future generations. So I'm going to continue to travel the world and unearth the stories that make it possible that we can live in a free United States of America.
Welcome to Arrowhead Cleaners, Newly renovated, modernized, and ready to make your cleaning needs hassle-free. From commercial and residential wash and fold laundry services to the latest in professional dry cleaning techniques, we are dedicated to your unique needs, offering alterations, fabrications, and even custom hat making. So whether you're a busy professional, a family on the go, or even a rodeo champion, Arrowhead Cleaners is here to take your things from messed up to dressed up. Now celebrating our 64th year in Arrowhead Plaza. Are you dealing with arthritis, nerve and back pain, dry skin, or superficial wounds, but found no relief? Give Stewart's Natural Health a try. For over 4 decades, Stewart's Natural Health has been helping people and animals with herbal and natural oil lotions, ointments, and creams with a mission to help you relieve pain and feel your best using the power of nature. Discover the safe, drug-free solution to your pain, guaranteed or your money back. Visit stewartsnatural.health today.
We are the St. Mary Sisters. We are building a new facility here in Bismarck, North Dakota, for the sake of training young women to be courageous teachers in this state. The sisters will educate the younger generation to be fully alive through truth and discipline. The sisters' life of devotion and joy will make a positive difference in your community. Check out what we're up to, see what's going on, and join our mission to make a difference in the lives of the children of North Dakota.
Ashley, North Dakota is where life moves a little slower, but never gets dull. From hunting, camping, and fishing to safe streets where kids can be kids, this is the best of small town living. And Ashley offers everything you need, from healthcare to hardware to countless ways to stay active. Here, we've invested in our future with major upgrades to roads, parks, and education. Whether you're here for the day or here for life, you'll find Ashley's where you ought to be.
There's never been a better time to rediscover the style, reliability, and all-season, all-terrain fun of the all-new Nissan lineup at the new and improved Ryan Nissan. Whether it's the sleek and stylish Murano, the adventure-ready Pathfinder, or the reimagined, ready-for-anything 2026 Rogue, the all-new Ryan Nissan has the vehicle of your dreams at a price perfect for any budget. It's time to rediscover your passion for the road. It's time to rediscover the all-new Ryan Nissan, engineered to endure.
Welcome down to Horn with Charlie Armey. I'm your host, Gary. I'm going to talking about scouting in the NFL. So, Charlie, having spent a year scouting from the Falcons to the Bills to the Packers, you had a very distinguished career scouting these pro athletes. You had to have some surprises, good and bad. Can you give us a few of those that we could? And sometimes you may name names, and maybe you won't name names at all.
Well, the biggest surprise for me was the first year I was scouting with Buffalo. Had this great player at Nebraska. I won't name his name. I don't want to embarrass him. But I went in and studied him and did all the disciplines. And he was a great player in college. And I thought to myself, "Golly, Mac, this guy can't." I gave him the best grade I ever gave a player in my first year of scouting. And we didn't draft him, but somebody else drafted him. Saw him pretty much the same way I did. He never played it down in the National Football League, but he couldn't adjust to the game on the National Football League level. Not only the competitiveness was not a problem, but the awareness and to be able to adapt mentally to what was going on the football field, he just couldn't handle it. And so he was a big disappointment for me. It taught me a great lesson. Don't skip any of the discipline processes of scouting a football player, because when you do, it's going to be a mistake and you're probably going to draft him. So it was an embarrassment for me personally that I had graded this player so high and that he turned out to be an absolute complete bust. But then there's other guys too. There's the guys where you sign him as a free agent, you think that this guy has a chance to play in the National Football League, and then they surprise you. They surprise you by fulfilling all the things that you think they don't have, suddenly turn up when you put them in the right environment. So those things happen on the pro and on the con. And there's a lot of those cases where players are overlooked. And that's one of the things when you talk about the draft board, everybody says, well, that guy wasn't even drafted. Well, that's because a lot of these guys slipped through the cracks. When you're thinking about 1,300 players and you have 145 on your draft board, somebody is being overlooked. And after the draft, we've always had 20 or 30 players we wanted to sign as free agents because we felt they had a chance to make the National Football League. One year I had personally signed 7 players for Green Bay Packers off that list, and all 7 of them made our football team. So you got to be careful, and you have to make sure you follow through your disciplines, and then when you find them and they develop, it's pretty rewarding for you. And that's happened to me a few times over the time. But then it's rewarding when you find a player like that and he develops and plays in the National Football League. So there's a lot of those cases that happen. And a lot of them, I've had a lot of failures. I drafted a kid one time out of Oklahoma State. I thought for sure would be a starting corner in the National Football League, and he was a complete bust because he couldn't handle the mental part of the game. I'll give you another example. A quarterback came out, was picked number 1 in the draft, and he came out of Tennessee. He was a great quarterback. Everybody had him ranked, including me, as the top quarterback in the draft. He never played. The problem was we all forgot the problem. He couldn't process the information quick enough and get the ball off quick enough to the right receiver to avoid failure. And then he just didn't make it. He couldn't overcome that inability to process the information. Some things like Kurt Warner, Tom Brady, this kid at Buffalo is fantastic with that ability. So you got to be careful when you start evaluating players and looking for, well, there's always going to be a free agent. There's always going to be a guy make it in the National Football League that people think was overlooked. They're not overlooked. They're just not in the situation where you can draft them. You can only draft 7 or 8 players or sign 7 or 8 free agents. And there's players every year that come through that system and make it in the National Football League and go on to be great players. And that happens all the time.
So, Charlie, if you take an NFL team, the number of players on the team, they all want to be back next year. But you're going to be drafting new players that are going to come in, or free agents that come into the mix. What is the turnover typically on an NFL team with new players that are outside the current pool of athletes?
Well, if you were the football team for 3 years, generally about 70% of your team will be turned over. But it's an interesting thing. A lot of things we'll get into in one of your future programs is salary cap, how that relates to building a football team. But the salary cap eats up and swallows a lot of football players and takes them off your roster. And we can go into that when we talk about the salary cap. But your turnover is pretty good. And a lot of times for example, our Super Bowl team that we had by the time I retired, most of those players were either moved on or out of the National Football League. So the turnover is quite high, and injuries are a factor, and salary cap is a factor, and you found a younger player, that's a factor. So the turnover is quite high, and it happens to every team in every year.
Charlie, I want to pivot to a unique athlete on an NFL team, a field goal kicker. I mean, so important, but totally a different athlete. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, they're a totally different breed, and you find them everywhere. Guys that can concentrate. You know, they stand around on the sidelines and maybe only play 3 or 4 plays, but they're very important to the success of the football team. So you have to do your due diligence in finding, again, a player that does not only have the accuracy and the leg strength, but again, it goes all right back to mental toughness, because that player is going to be put into a really tough mental situation where he's going to decide the fact whether you win or lose the ball game. And all the guys that you're on your team are relying on you to make this pressure kick. So when you evaluate a kicker, you not only evaluate his ability to kick the ball with accuracy and leg strength, but you have to evaluate his ability to handle the pressure of the moment, the mental toughness. such a big factor in the success of every position in the National Football League.
You know, I watched, I think 30 years ago, there was a 60 Minutes show on field goal kickers, and it was, I think it might have talked about suicide rate or something, because, I mean, you can be the GOAT or the hero from one week to the next, and just the whole challenge of it. A lot of times it's not only that you got the long snapper or you got the person, you know, hiking the ball, you got a person holding the ball, and sometimes it's not even your fault, and you could have made a good kick. So I think that's interesting. We got a couple more minutes. I'd like to ask you just a question contrasting NFL scouting to NBA to Major League Baseball. Did you run into other scouts from other disciplines of sports that was much different, or did you all kind of have the same thing thinking about what you're looking for in an athlete? Obviously, toughness for football is much different than baseball.
Baseball is very interesting. You know, being the general manager at the Rams, I had a great association with the St. Louis Cardinals, and we spent a lot of time together with their scouting department. But the scouting departments are much larger in baseball and much more in depth because they go all the way back to high school. They start scouting these kids when they're in high school, sophomores and juniors and seniors in high school. A lot of them are drafted out of high school, and it's a very unique system in scouting system in baseball, and the principles are the same, but the uniqueness and the style is a lot different, and you're looking at a lot different. But again, it always boils down to mental toughness for people who can handle pressure situations. Pitchers are a unique position, pretty much like being a quarterback in the National Football League. And pitcher is a unique position, and you're going to overcome failure at some point. So scouting was unique in the baseball world. I got involved with it because of my association with the St. Louis baseball team, and I enjoyed talking to their scouts and getting their perspective on things they look for and how they evaluated players for their team. And it was interesting how we went back and forth and some of the similarities and some of the things that were totally different in what you look for.
All right, we got about a minute before we go to the break. I just have a question related to the speed of the game. From college to the NFL, and the athletes are all such high caliber. When a ball snapped until that play's ended, the speed of college to NFL, contrast that for me.
Can you blink? It's about that quick. It was. There's absolutely no. That's the other thing you have to be able to evaluate. Can the player handle the speed of the game in the National Football League? And you know, a lot of the guys are throwing a lot of great balls in college and making a lot of decisions and a lot of receptions, a lot of production. But you got to be able to do that in pro football. You remember, all those athletes in pro football are on the same level as the athletes that you have on your side of the ball. So your reaction time and everything has to be much, much quicker. And the game is much faster. You often hear the people talking about he's got to find a way to slow the game down. That means you got to find a way to increase your reaction time to what's happening on the football field. That slows the game down and makes you a much better quarterback. But it is a fast-moving game that requires constant mental toughness and concentration in order to achieve.
So, Charlie, we're going to wrap this session up, and when we come back, our next show, we're going to talk about the finances, salary caps, and the impact it has on running a football league and how it matters on which team. Because all of a sudden, hey, we won a Super Bowl, everything's great, we're going to be great for the next decade. Doesn't work that way, does it? So I appreciate you joining us today on The Horn with Charlie Armey. So thank you for being with us. We'll be back again. So I'm your host, Gary Eminent. Thanks for watching.